intelligencesquared.com.
The current phase of the process suffers on the Israeli side from a very interesting state of indifference. The Israelis are entirely blasé. You cannot expect them to offer an active support to the process, to the peacemakers, as it were. Now, on the Palestinian side, there is a very serious deficit of legitimacy of the Oslo group that is leading these negotiations. Let us not forget that they rule by decree, they do not convene parliament, they postpone elections, and they rely on security forces and the bayonets of the occupier. I think this is a major flaw of the current process. Throughout history, we have known that national movements, when they have to reach the promised land, if they want to reach the promised land, they have to split. But never before was the democratically elected majority marginalized. A change of paradigm here is very necessary. Recover the legitimacy of the process that looks more as an American strategic interest than an autonomous Palestinian decision, abandon the strategy of toppling Hamas, facilitate Palestinian reconciliation, exchange of prisoners, and allow Palestinians to reshape their national movement because it is in shambles. There is no national Palestinian movement Israel is supposed to negotiate with. Now, there is a Bibi or a Netanyahu enigma. Nobody knows. I mean, the difference between the left and the right is the left is normally very transparent. Everybody knows the positions. In this case, there is an enigma. Maybe he will surprise us. Optimists say that there is a new approach by making, he wants to make concessions under different name, that dividing Jerusalem without actually dividing it, withdrawing by maintaining security presence, dismantling while leaving settlers. If he manages to square this circle, I think he will be entitled to a Nobel in physics, not in peace.
We Palestinians and Israelis today are stuck between the historically inevitable and the politically impossible. We the Palestinians are the only ones who would give Israel a legitimate birth certificate to be recognized and accepted regionally. Israel must recognize it is either Jerusalem or whole of Israel. If negotiations fail, the one-state solution will become a de facto reality, and this is an idea that Israel totally rejects.
We ran from one failure to another, from Oslo to White River, to Camp David, to Taba, to Stockholm, to Annapolis, and now another new round. Sometimes it looks like the world has become addicted to the peace process. All they need is another injection of a peace process to avoid the pains of acknowledging the suffering and the injustice that is happening because of the longest occupation in modern history. There are absolute lack of terms of reference. This is much worse than what we had in Madrid conference, where there was a UN resolutions and there were certain international laws determining the terms of reference of the process. Today, Israel is the determinant of what can be discussed and what cannot be discussed. Today, the issue of security is used in the wrong way. This is the first time in human history where one side wants security before peace. And this is the first time in human history where occupied people are asked to provide security to their occupiers without having themselves the security of their own. This formula will not work. What we need is equality.
We are in a settlement moratorium. I realize the moratorium expires in 6 days, but we no longer see Israelis building settlements left and right whenever a US Secretary of State or Vice President comes to Israel. Though not an indefinite moratorium, there is far less settlement under Bibi than under the previous labor and centrist governments. Obama himself is committed to the peace process. You know, timing is important. And unlike Bill Clinton at the end of 2000 and George W. Bush at the end of 2008, which is when the Olmert-Abbas meetings took place, we have a president who is in the middle of his first term. He's not going to disappear. The best news, in my opinion, in the recent month was when President Abbas warned Ahmadinejad to mind his own business and let the Palestinians make their own decisions.
Peace is not the charade. The charade is the peace process. the fact that these underemployed Swedish diplomats descend and come and decide and so on. And then there come the ex-senators from the United States and even former British prime ministers and so on. Now, what's happened throughout history? Is this how peace came about? No, it was war itself that brought peace. War is an educational process. There is the perverse, noxious, disastrous language of rights. Let me tell you, Hungary has a right to Arad, the city where I was born. China has a right to Vladivostok. Poland has a right to Lvov. The Slovaks have a right to Uzhgorod. The Sudeten Germans have a right to their homes, which are now lived in by Czechs. If there are more rights than there is space, there is more rights than square miles. If you want to have a war, talk the language of rights. Talk the language of justice. If you want to have peace, make a deal. There is some professor, Gaz or something from the London School of Economics, Fuzzy Ghazi, who keeps saying that Mubarak is a traitor, Abdallah is a traitor, and Abbas is a traitor, because the real heroes are Hezbollah and Iran and Erdogan of Turkey. Erdogan, of course, started talking about Palestinian national rights. He should have whispered, because it was overheard by 20 million Kurds who are saying, pretty good idea, national rights and so on. The fact is,
I want to thank the organisers, Intelligence Squared, for organising this debate, but I don't thank them for lining up my friends Shlomo, Mustafa and Edward on the other side of this debate, simply because it has caused a great deal of confusion in their own minds. Edward, for instance, is a great strategist, and I mean that sincerely, but he seems to be totally confused by the notion of peacemaking. And in particular, I have to point out to him that there hasn't been a Swede involved in the Arab-Israeli peace process since Count Bernadotte in 1948. So, Gunnar Jarring, who remembers Gunnar Jarring? There were Norwegians involved, but not Swedes. We have, for the first time, on the Israeli side, a right-wing Israeli prime minister who has, for the last 10 years, said that Israel has no Palestinian partner, now says to Abu Mazen in front of the world, Mr. Palestinian President, you are my partner, who says we have to find a way to reconcile the Palestinian need for sovereignty with our need for security. That is an unusual thing to come from an Israeli prime minister of the right wing, because they never before accepted the notion that the Palestinians should have sovereignty in what they have previously regarded as the land of Israel. And on the Palestinian side, we have a leader in Abu Mazen who is committed to making peace, is committed to trying to achieve a solution through negotiations, and who is thoroughly opposed to the violence that Hamas, Hezbollah and Iran promote. Hamas itself has pursued an alternative of violence, claims that violence is the way to redeem Palestine, but you don't see Hamas today promoting violence out of Gaza. No, they were defeated in the last war that they had with the Israelis, and now they police the territory of Gaza to prevent attacks on Israel for fear that they will end up losing control of that territory. So that's why the circumstances today are quite different from the ones that have pertained over the last 10 years, and why I believe there is some reason, as Jonathan says, for cautious optimism.